What do I think of IAR-only channels at broker-dealers? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is question number 64. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where I help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition to the RIA model. If you're not already there, head on over to transitiontoria.com. You can find all of the resources I make available to help you understand that model, from all the videos I make to the podcast series. I have white papers, I have articles. Everything is there for you to consume for free. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, on today's episode is a topic that it's been in the news kind of more recently as firms are rolling out these new channels. And so I am getting asked about this. And so I did want to do a whole episode on it. And specifically, it is these so-called IAR-only channels that are appearing at broker-dealers. And so I want to dive into that topic here on today's episode, and specifically 5 different kind of elements to those channels that I wanted to discuss on this episode. I had to take good notes here because I did want to cover all 5. So just to recap before we go in, then the 5 will be, the first one is, what is an IAR only channel that are appearing at broker dealers? So what is it? Next question we're going to talk about is, why are broker dealers setting up these new channels? Why are they appearing as they are? The third is, how do these IAR channels compare to other alternatives in the marketplace? So we'll dive into that. Fourth, we'll talk about who these IAR only channels appeal to, or will likely appeal to, in the marketplace. And finally, we will go into thoughts that I have of what I think broker dealers need to do to improve their IAR only channels and make them more appealing to advisors. So we'll finish on that at the end. So for starters, the first part is, what is an IAR only channel? So IAR, Investment Advisor Representative. That is where you have your 65 or 66, or depending on the state you're in, maybe you're excluded because you have a CFP or a CFA or something like that, where you are under an RIA. It could be your own RIA, it could be someone else's RIA, but the formal title of that is an Investment Advisor Representative. You as the individual under this RIA. Now, most financial advisors in the marketplace today essentially wear kind of 2 hats, or not essentially, they do wear 2 hats, with rare exception where that's not the case. And so what those 2 hats are that IAR under their firm's corporate, as they say, corporate RIA, and that is what allows them to offer fee-based accounts to their clients. And then simultaneously, they are a quote unquote registered representative under the corporate broker dealer, and that is what enables them to offer commission accounts to clients. And of course, those have 2 entirely different regulatory bodies that oversee them. So FINRA oversees the broker dealer side and has its set of rules. And then the SEC oversees the RIA side and establishes the rules that go with that. So most advisors nowadays that are offering commission and fee only solutions are wearing this dual hat. Again, they are an investment advisor representative under the corporate RIA. They are a registered representative under the broker dealer. And so what's kind of happening in the marketplace, and this is essentially happening at independent broker dealers. I think we'll see, I'll kind of dive into it. I think we're going to see versions of this come along, and the W-2 kind of wirehouse type model as well. But for now, when I talk about IAR only channels, we're seeing this in the independent broker dealer world. And so what those broker dealers are saying is, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Advisor that are wearing 2 hats, and maybe your practice has evolved to the point where more and more of your clients are in fee-based accounts, which is by far the industry trend. That's what we're seeing. And so, hey, maybe that's almost entirely now fee-based. And so what these broker dealers are saying is, hey, advisor, why don't you just drop your 7, drop that FINRA affiliation, drop your affiliation with our corporate broker dealer, and be an IAR only under our corporate RIA. So that in short is what an IAR only channel is. It's saying, hey, for advisors that want to be 100% fee only, they don't need or want any sort of BD affiliation. Hey, you can do that under our RIA, often referred to as a corporate RIA, and you do not need our broker dealer in any capacity. And that is a relatively new evolution. There was certainly a time where even if an advisor was 100% fee only, independent broker dealers would still require that you have your 7, because that's how their systems are set up, and the expectation, we're going to get into what some of these challenges are. And now they've kind of evolved to the point where they say, okay, hey, you can not at all be attached to our broker dealer, but you can be under the corporate RA. So again, in definition, that is what an IAR only channel is. So the number 2 that we're going to talk about, the next question is, okay, great. So why are independent broker dealers setting these up? And by far, the number 1 reason is for retention. So they have their existing advisors in that traditional independent broker dealer channel that are becoming increasingly fee-based. Again, that's where the industry trend is by far going. And those advisors are asking themselves as they reach more and more closer to that 100%, so extreme example, let's say you're already 98% fee-based, and that final 2% you could solve for. I've done all kinds of episodes on how to solve for the remaining or existing part of the commission assets in your practice if you wanted to move more into an RA model. And so the route is those independent broker dealers are watching these advisors leave their independent broker dealer, and they're saying, okay, because I'm 98, 99% fee-based, why am I still here? Why am I attached to your broker dealer? Why am I putting up with FINRA when I'm essentially already fee only anyways? And so as a retention tool, these firms are rolling out these IAR only options. Now, of course, they come out in the marketplace and in the press and press releases and all those sorts of things and say, oh, what a great platform. And we're going to try to attract advisors into this. And of course, they are going to work to do that. But make no mistake, at its core, the motivator for why these are coming to fruition initially is retention, because they are losing advisors that are becoming increasingly fee-based and moving more into an RA model. And they would rather, and this is understandable as a business, they would rather attempt to retain those advisors than see them lost off to some sort of RIA model or iteration. And so it's actually interesting that we even call these, and I am here in this episode as well, because it's the normal verbiage we use. We're even calling these firms independent broker dealers still, because of those 2 hats that I talked about and most advisors at these firms wear. And that, again, more and more of the assets are moving to the fee-based side to the degree where all of the large independent broker dealers, the majority of their advisors' clients' assets are indeed in fee-based accounts now on that RIA side, not in commission accounts. So it's interesting that we still call them independent broker dealers, which it turns out also have a corporate RIA alongside it, when in fact, we should probably just be referring to them as corporate RIAs that also happen to have a broker dealer for the remaining amount of the commission assets that still exist, that their clients have, or I'm sorry, that their advisors have. And you do see some independent broker dealers going towards this, where they're rebranding their independent broker dealer channel by just simply calling it a corporate RIA. And to for the advisors that do have some commission business, hey, they have a way to accommodate that. But that's kind of the evolution. And so it's interesting that we even call them independent broker dealers, but we probably will for quite some time, because that's just how it's always been said. But again, the reason these firms are setting up these IAR only channels by far is for retention purposes of their existing advisors in that quote unquote independent broker dealer channel. And for reasons I'll get into here in just a second, I think these firms are going to have a hard time attracting external advisors that are at some other firm, some other affiliation model, into those IAR only channels. I think they will have some success, but I think it will be a challenge as well. So again, it's primarily, at least for the foreseeable future, in my opinion, a retention play internally, that they'd rather retain their advisors in some capacity than lose them altogether. Again, makes sense that they do this. I wish they would just maybe kind of come out and be a little more forthright about it, but it is what it is. Okay, so the third thing I want to talk about is some of the how does this IAR only channel at these independent broker dealers compare to alternatives that might be out there. So if you are an advisor that's maybe in that potential retention situation, or you hear the news about these new channels and you say, okay, hey, that might be interesting to me, and I am a believer, you should look at different options, understand the pros and cons of each, and how they might be a good fit for your practice or not. So by all means, take a look at them. But the question is, okay, well, what are the alternatives out there that I should be comparing them to? And so that's what I want to just dive into here briefly. But I'll start by talking about some of the challenges of those existing IAR-only channels that, again, these independent broker-dealers are rolling out. And I've referenced why I think it's going to be hard for them to attract in advisors that are not already with their firm, and it's because of some of these challenges. So the first one is, keep in mind, these independent broker-dealers are essentially having to reinvent themselves. Again, by the very name, they were historically broker-dealers that eventually incorporated some sort of corporate RIA into their offering, and now that the wind has shifted so much that's now actually becoming the dominant force. And so the challenge is, again, these firms are having to reinvent themselves from what they've built up over decades. So you have decades of in-house technology that was built with this, if not broker-dealer, at least this dual hat advisor in mind. You have decades of institutional knowledge there within on the leadership team or the rank and file there at the home office that is again used to, we need to adhere or comply with what is expected of that dual hat financial advisor. And then you have, as an example, whole compliance teams that are, again, everything they've been doing up until now, no matter how short or long they've been there, is with this mindset that these advisors are also registered representatives of a FINRA regulated broker dealer. And so this is how we have to treat them. And the reality is you can't just instantly flip that switch. Again, they are having to reinvent themselves. And I used to work at the home office of a multi-channel broker dealer. And the reality is I used to give, I was in the RIA channel at the firm, and I would go and give presentations to different back office areas, whether it's operational areas or technology areas or whatnot, to help them understand the RIA side of things, because that institutional knowledge they had was on this registered representative, this FINRA way of doing things. And I think there is progress being made, but you cannot just turn all that off and think, okay, now we are full just on the corporate RIA side, and everything we do is based on that knowledge and the requirements of such a channel. So again, just know you have this legacy challenge that they're having to reinvent themselves, and you'll see how that compares to some of the alternatives here in a moment. Another challenge they have is at an independent broker dealer that has this IAR-only channel. Typically, you only have one custodian to choose from. It is their own custodian. Often the larger firms are self-clearing. So compared to the alternatives, which I'll mention, you only have one custodial option, and it is their custodial option. And that might be great. That might fit your needs, and it's something you can look at. But just know that is a challenge compared to alternatives out there, that you are forced to essentially be single custodial, and it is their custodian. Next challenge they have is that they provide you with their own proprietary technology. So part of it is, hey, you can use our corporate RIA, and look, we have this wonderful technology built out. In many cases, it is some very good technology, but the reality is the RIA model has evolved to the point where the by far standard way of doing things is to use third-party tech stacks. I've done a whole episode on that, and you have some wonderful technology vendors out in the marketplace that are providing wonderful solutions that continue to evolve, continue to innovate, continue to get better. And so the challenge for those IAR-only channels at a large broker-dealer that are using their own in-house proprietary technology is, can they continue to compete with these technology vendors out there that have actually more scale than any one particular broker dealer has to justify the cost needed to build out these solutions? So can that in-house proprietary technology compete against these third-party solutions? There's a reason, and again, in the RA model, the typical approach is to use that third-party technology stack. That's just something we're not really seeing with these IAR-only options. So something to consider there as well. And then the last one, before I just explain some alternatives, is it's harder to, because of some of those things I just mentioned, which is not an exhaustive list. It's harder to one day, perhaps break away and start your own RIA. So what I mean by that is, let's say you are in the quote unquote independent broker dealer channel of one of these firms, and you are becoming more and more increasingly fee-based, and you think, okay, maybe I want to have my own RIA at some point. Maybe I want to join an RIA. I've done a whole episode of why you might want to join an RIA, which is what you're effectively doing just with that IAR-Only channel. But the idea is, if you were to one day say, hey, I want to have my own RIA, well, under that, again, typical model, you will be using third-party custodians, you'll be using third-party technology, all those sorts of things. So if you just kind of take it's hard to say, a baby step and go to this in-house IAR-Only channel, well, if one day you then want to become your own RIA, you still have to reinvent your practice at that point. It does not set you up easily to take that next and final step of having your own RIA. Again, I'll mention when I talk here alternatives. So just know that that is a challenge. It is harder. At some point you're going to have to take some that bigger step. So the question is, do you want to do that in-house small step initially, then still have to do it later on? Or just to, hey, if I'm going to make the move, I'm going to be kind of all in with the RA model, go ahead and do it more with what the standard approach is in the marketplace currently. And so from an alternative standpoint, what I would point out is, I'm talking about the challenge of the independent broker dealers. They have this historical legacy, knowledge, technology, infrastructure, operations, compliance. Everything is built for, again, what that dual hat advisor, and they're having to reinvent themselves. They only have a single custodian. They have proprietary technology. Well, there are firms that recognized years ago and said, okay, hey, we realize there are advisors that are making this migration more and more to fee-based that will want to drop their FINRA, drop their broker-dealer affiliation at some point, but perhaps don't want to start their own RIA. As I always say, there's pros and cons with all of the different approaches. Again, that's why you might want to join an RIA. Go check out the standalone episode that I did on that. And so these firms were started from the start. They don't have decades of a different kind of model, kind of as an anchor holding them back. These firms were started from the beginning to cater to that fee-based advisor. So the proprietors of these firms, when they started up, said, okay, hey, if we're going to start effectively a standalone IAR-only channel, how are we going to build that out, and how can we make that most attractive for advisors to come into? So that is things like, hey, they are multi-custodial. That is things like, hey, they do use that best-in-breed third-party technology. They do make it possible that, hey, if you were to join their firm and establish those third-party custodians and start using third-party technology, that if one day you ever did outgrow their offering, you could step away and continue to use the same custodian, continue to use the same technology. Now, I should back up, quick sidebar. There are all different kinds of flavors of RIAs you can join. So there are some RIAs you can join that will want or require that they acquire your practice. There are some that will require that you use their firm name. There are some that will require you be a W-2 employee of theirs. And there's different reasons you might explore those particular flavors of that offering. However, what I'm essentially referring to here as an alternative to that broker-dealer IAR-only channel is there are these purpose-built firms that recognize and say, no, you will retain 100% ownership of your practice. You will be able to use your own brand. You will be able to one day, if you ever feel you've outgrown us or we've outgrown you, you will be able to leave and break away and start your own firm or go to another RIA if that's the case. So they're purpose-built from the start to cater to the exact advisors that the broker-dealers are now trying to retain in-house. And so it's not to say that these broker-dealers aren't working hard to build out a competitive offering, but the question is, as you consider them, okay, hey, what does that in-house version look like with its inherent challenges that I mentioned? And then how do these standalone purpose-built RIA offerings compare to that? And I would just say, hey, if you're in a situation where you're going to explore, the IAR-only offering, you might as well you look at that. It's important to look at and understand it. But then it's also saying, okay, what are those alternatives? How do they compare? So it's important to know they're out there and know that there are differences in the offerings. So Moving along, number 4. So, okay, with these challenges, again, who is these IAR only channels at broker dealers? Who's it going to appeal to? And again, typically the number, in my opinion, the main advisor set that's going to find that appeal are the advisors that are already with that broker dealer. So they're already in an independent broker dealer channel, or maybe the firm has a W-2 channel, and they are becoming increasingly fee-based. And they do want to step away from FINRA. They do want to step away from broker-dealer. It is logistically easier to simply make that quote-unquote internal transition from one of those channels over to maybe the IAR-only channel, even if it's arguably not as competitive as the alternatives out there in the marketplace. It is a simpler transition, and you do see a lot of advisors making that move, and that's perfectly fine. What I tell advisors is you just have to weigh out, okay, it's an easier transition, but it maybe comes with trade-offs. And so what is more important to you? And that's, again, something I help advisors think through is the pros and cons of all these different pathways and approaches they could take. But I do think it will appeal to some of those advisors, and it will be a retention opportunity for those broker dealers to retain a number of advisors in that capacity. So I think there is going to be some appeal. I just think they will struggle to attract advisors that are at other firms or other affiliation models into their offering. Now, okay, it's easy for me to say, oh, wow, they should do this better. So what do I think? The last thing I want to talk about is what do I think they could do to make these IAR-only channels more appealing to those external advisors and not just be a retention play or an easier internal transition type play. And so I want to give you a couple of examples of what I think would be, or what I believe would be necessary to make these more competitive. So number 1, I think you have to bring in essentially new leadership from the RIA world. So if your value proposition to your internal advisors or to external advisors is, hey, if you don't need that broker dealer thing anymore, you don't need that FINRA thing, join or transition into our IAR only channel. Well, the reality is if that IAR only channel is embedded in the same channel as the independent broker dealer channel and led by the same team members that have been with that independent broker dealer channel for perhaps years, perhaps decades, how different are they actually going to run the RIA channel? Do they have the experience and the knowledge of what is competitive out there in the RIA marketplace to say, okay, hey, no, this is a different animal than this independent broker dealer thing. We have to treat it differently. We have to build it differently. We have to run it differently. And I think you need external people that have lived in the RIA world to come in and say, okay, this is what it takes to be competitive against our direct competitors out there in the marketplace. And there's some wonderful people that have worked a long time in independent broker dealers. This is not a knock on them. I just think if you've been in that world for years, if not decades, again, that institutional knowledge, I'm just not sure that prepares you well to lead the IAR only channel. So I would just ask, if you're looking at one of these channels, is, hey, who is leading this, and how is that different than who is leading the independent broker dealer channel that is pretty close alongside of it. Next up, I would, as an advisor, ask, hey, is there a entirely separate compliance team that provides the compliance for the IAR only channel? Or is it really just the same team that does the independent broker dealer channel as well? And now some of them have the additional responsibility or just a different responsibility for the IAR only channel. And again, the reason that's a challenge is, and it's not their fault, but the compliance folks that, again, for years or decades have run things with the mindset of advisors wearing, 2 hats. And how are they just going to flip the switch and all of a sudden say, hey, yeah, things are different over here in the RIA world, so we'll do them differently? I think you need a standalone team brought in from the RIA world that says, okay, hey, here's how things work in the RIA world. I don't really care how it used to work in the FINRA world or broker dealer world, because that's not applicable to us anymore. All that matters is the RIA world. We are IAR only. And I just think internally, and again, if I were you and looking at that, just say, is there a Chinese wall? Is it a separate set of compliance people? And do they have the separate experience of that RIA world to be able to manage that? And then the last one, I would just say, how is that IAR only channel tasked with growing that offering. So what I mean by that is they have to build something that's attractive, that's competitive to the alternatives in the marketplace. And can they do that? Can they set how they price the offer? And can they set the types of solutions they provide for advisors? Can they set how they manage compliance against the marketplace, the RIA alternatives? Or do they also have to be cognizant or mindset of, well, if we let the advisors in this channel do that, but we're still not letting them do it in these other channels we have, that could cause some internal frustration, and there's some politics, and advisors over here might be unhappy. So maybe we can't do it over here. And I say the only way to make this successful is you essentially have to have that in a silo. You have to have that, again, that right leadership with the right experience, the right compliance folks. And you have to say, hey, go build this to be competitive with the RIA alternatives out there in the marketplace. It doesn't matter what our other channels are doing. They have their own competition. If they want to price things one way and we want to price it a different way, we should be able to do it. If they want to offer or not offer certain solutions, but we want to be able to offer those solutions, we should be able to do it, because guess what? That's what it takes to be competitive to the IAR-only channels, alternatives in the marketplace. I think that's key. And if those firms don't provide the leadership of that channel, the ability to do that, I don't know how they're going to compete, or again, how they're going to be able to attract in. So again, my suggestion, I want to see, great competition in the marketplace, because it's better for advisors. I think they have to have the right leadership. You have to have the right compliance separate from the independent broker-dealer compliance. And finally, I think you have to give them the freedom and flexibility to compete in the marketplace and not have to be mindful of what these other channels are doing. Because at the end of the day, if they are holding them back, then it's effectively no different than just the traditional independent broker-dealer channel regardless. And so that's a couple different topics. I do encounter this. I actually encountered it just recently. I was having a conversation. I won't name the firm. A lady that had been in their independent broker-dealer channel a little while back. She moved into their IAR-only channel. And I did ask her, I said, okay, can you really tell much of a difference now that you've made this move? And her response was, no, not really at all. I mean, there's a little difference in how they price it out, but as far as the compliance, as far as the supervision, oversight, technology, she said it's almost effectively the same thing. Again, it might still be good for you. You should look at it. You should consider it. But I just think they're kind of overblown unless they get the freedom and flexibility to do some of the things I talked about. And even then, it's going to take some time for these platforms to evolve. So just want to give some perspective on what these are, what I think can be done to improve them, things you should consider as you maybe look at them as an option for your practice, and just know what those alternatives are out there as well. So like I said, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, and this is the type of conversation I have all day long with advisors is understanding, hey, do I even want to go into the RIA model? And then to the degree I want to, what sort of options and pathways exist? So the IAR-only option at a broker-dealer absolutely does exist now, and I think we're going to see more and more firms roll out such offerings. And so you should look at it, you should understand how it works, and you should also know what the alternatives look at. So that is the sort of thing I help advisors with. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. If you're not already there, again, head on over to transitiontoria.com. You can find all of my resources, the videos, the podcasts, the white papers, the articles, and then at the top of every page is a contact link. You can click on that and you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related you'd like to talk about. Again, transitiontoria.com. With that, I hope you found value on today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.